Alrighty. CCENT ICND1 Part 3. So what I've added here is I've added two more machines on switch 0. It's a 192.168.10.2 and a 10.3. And notice there on PC4 we have a rollover cable plugged into the serial port on the computer to the console port on the device, router 1. So what I want to do first is I want to address these VLANs. What I want to do is take a look at what VLANs we have. I want to go ahead and create VLANs. And I want to go ahead and move those VLANs, move those ports into the correct VLANs. So we got the lock to cover. Let's get started. So I'm going to come in here and switch 0. And I'm going to do a show VLAN. And what you're going to see is all my ports by default are in VLAN 1. You'll see also VLAN 1002, 3, 4, and 5. These are unsupported. Okay, but from my understanding, Cisco needed to include those to meet some type of certification. But again, these are unsupported. These are old technologies. So let's go ahead and start off. We're going to go into global configuration mode. We're going to go ahead and create VLAN. Let's make it VLAN 10 and give it a name. Call it marketing. And if we do show VLAN, we'll see we do in fact have VLAN 10 there with a name of marketing. Well, that's great, but we need to make it useful. In other words, we need to move ports into it so it behaves in that VLAN. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into interface, fast Ethernet 02, which is one of my ports. And just to make sure, there we go, we're in the right mode, we're going to go ahead and make it an access port. Because remember, access ports are what our end devices are going to use. And what we're going to do now is we're going to move that port into VLAN 10 by saying switch port. I want it to access VLAN 10. And to prove that worked, we're going to show VLAN. And you see now 02 has been added. Now we can add over 04 and do it the exact same way, but let me show you another way to handle this. I'm going to go ahead and move back fast Ethernet 02 and move it back to VLAN 1 for a minute. And what I want to do now is I'm going to address both ports at the same time. So in other words, let's say you had to move over ports 2 through 10. Well, you wouldn't want to go into every interface and move it. It makes more sense to move over the entire range. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to type in interface fast Ethernet 02. Now I could say through, let's say 10. What that would do is move all the ports over from fast Ethernet 02 all the way up to 010. However, what if I want 02 and 04 but not 03? We can do that by saying, forgot my range command, need that, fast Ethernet 02, comma, fast Ethernet 0/4. And notice now it says config interface range. So whatever I do now affects both 02 and 04. Switch port mode access. Switch port, I want to access VLAN 10. And now we do a do show VLAN. And you notice both ports 2 and 4 have now been moved. And you also see on the diagram there that we've turned amber, right? Because we've now moved VLANs. It's having to figure out what's going on. As you move into ICND, later ICND1 and more so ICND2, we talk more about the different kinds of modes in terms of, is it trunking? We're talking about dynamic desirable and all those good terms. But for now, it should make sense that we move those into their own VLAN. Now, just a reminder, machines in the same VLAN, provided their IP scheme is correct, will be able to ping each other. If they're outside the VLAN, they will not. So one challenge you have here is if 3 machines are plugged into a switch, and that switch goes to a router, what IP address do you use as a default gateway? So for example, if some machines are on the 10 network and some machines are on the 1 network, you need an interface of both of those to get out. And that's where we have what's called inter-VLAN routing. And what we're talking about here is if we have a layer 3 switch, we can handle that. And if we don't, we have other mechanisms such as sub-interfaces. Again, this goes beyond the scope of this introduction class. But I just want to make sure you understand there are ways to get out. There are ways out of this network. So, we have the VLANs working now. And what I want to do now is pull my list back up. And let's cover some domain lookups. So I'm going to go back into privilege mode. And let's say I mistyped the command and hit enter. What you'll see here is translating whatever I typed. And if I hit enter or some command or keys, it just sits here and hangs. What it's trying to do is it assumes that you want to try to get to another server. So what it's doing, it's trying to look up what you typed and try to translate it, DNS, to its IP address. So one thing we can do is hit the Control Shift X to stop it. Notice there, Control Shift, I said X, I'm sorry. Control Shift 6. So we do it again. Control Shift 6. And notice it stopped the lookup. We can also turn off the lookup. So I'm going to go into global configuration mode. And what I'm going to do is type in no IP domain lookup. Don't look up that way. Hit enter. So now when I go and do the same thing I did before, it just tells me it's an unknown command or computer name. Okay, so let's take a look at some of our show commands now. So the ones that will be important for the exam. Okay, so the first one I'll look at is show our MAC address table. I want to know what my switch has learned about. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to PC3. I'm going to ping its neighbor, ping 192.168.10.2. Notice I get a reply back. And from PC0, I'm going to ping my default gateway at 192.168.1.1. So let's see what our switch learned about. Go into our switch and do a show MAC address table. And notice here, from VLAN 1, it learned about those two machines with the corresponding MAC addresses. And then it learned about VLAN 10 with those corresponding MAC addresses. That way, if any of those machines need to talk back and forth with one another, it doesn't have to go ahead and do the whole ARP process and trying to figure out what the MAC addresses are and that whole thing. The great thing now is the switch knows about where everything's located that's connected to that switch. It makes things much, much quicker. So what we're going to do now is run some other show commands. What about show flash? And what show flash does, we're seeing two bits of information here. One is the VLAN.dat. VLAN information will not show up in your running configuration. It's actually stored in a specific DAT file. So, for example, if you try to wipe your configs out and your VLAN information is still there, well, the reason why is because it's stored in a separate file. The second thing is you see a .bin file, binary, and that is your image. We can type show version. And show version tells you a whole lot of information about how many ports are on there and memory and serial numbers, what iOS version it's running. One of the big things here and test-wise you want to be prepared for is the configuration register is here as well. And we're going to get into configuration registers later, but just want to make sure you know where to find it. So show version will allow you to see that information. Okay, so we can remove show flash, show version. We can remove show MAC address table. What about this CDP? Well, if I do a show CDP neighbors, it's going to tell me at layer 2 about devices that are hooked up to it. I hit enter. Notice here it does locate the switch. I'm sorry, the router. It says, yeah, through Fast Ethernet 01, I'm connected to a platform C2800 because we're using a 2811 router through the port Fast Ethernet 0/1. Now what if I need IP address information on it? I can simply go ahead and change that to detail. If you look up there where it says entry addresses, it says IP address 192.168.1.1. So there's even additional information about the image. There's layer 3 information about the IP. This is great if, let's say for example, you're looking at a diagram, network diagram, and it's wrong. You need to tell that into it, but you don't know what the IP address is, and you can't get to that device to find what the IP is. This now allows us the ability to pull that information up at layer 2. So let's add another router in, just to make sure that this is working the way you expect it to. I'm going to go ahead and add another 2811 in. And we'll go ahead and get a straight through cable. We're going to go into Fast Ethernet 00. I believe that's the one I chose. Yes. That would be nice if I went to the right mode here, global configuration mode. Let's give it an IP address. How about that? No shut. Notice it's now turned green. Green is good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over to the switch and run show CDP neighbors. And notice now it knows both routers. So it says through Fast Ethernet 05, which we see here is still amber. The platform is a 2800 and it's connecting to Fast Ethernet 0/0. If I go back and add the detail in there, we see in fact IP address 11.1. Now you might say, wait Pete, this is dangerous. CDP sounds kind of dangerous because if someone can get in, they can see all the different connecting devices. Well, we have a way to turn that off. We can go back into the router and we can do one or two things. We can either go to the specific interface and say, on this interface, I don't want CDP to respond on that particular interface. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is from the entire device saying no CDP run. Just making sure I got the right command there. So on the interface it's no CDP enable, but for the entire router in global configuration mode it's no CDP run. Enter. So I'm going to go back to the switch now and run that command again. And let's see if this is what you expected to come up. So what you notice here is it's still seeing that router, even though I told you that by setting that command up, it should have stopped it. So the question is why? What you notice is we have a countdown. And what's going to happen is once that countdown hits 0, it will then respond and say, I'm not allowed to get this information anymore. So keep that in mind that once you do it, you're going to have to wait a bit before it starts masking itself again. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to our list here. Give that a second to do what it needs to do. And we got rid of all our CDP information right here. Let's check on how we're doing. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to stop it here and we pick up in the next video. We'll take a look at what happened with our CDP information. Thanks for joining me. I'll see you then. Bye.